There was something about a backdoor that allowed you to execute commands that could alter the company's financial records without alerting others. You secretly were moving money in the background.
Wait, and this is something that I would be doing?
It kind of said that SBF put like a secret backdoor so that he was moving funds to Alameda and it was undetected. Like this was something that you put into place potentially. I mean, that's how it read.
Well, that's interesting. So that I can tell you is definitely not true. I don't even know how to code, is the honest, embarrassing answer. I certainly wasn't like building some backdoor in the system. I could barely use the system. That's not true. I knew the system pretty well from a user interface perspective. But I literally never have opened the code base. Look, I don't think that the worst things that are said are true, but like, you don't get in the situation that we got in if you if you make all the right decisions. Like, if if I'd been more careful, there's a billion things I could have done.
There was something about a backdoor that allowed you to execute commands that could alter the company's financial records without alerting others. That this was put in place. I think that was a Reuters article, which made it seem like you secretly were moving money in the background.
Wait, and this is something that I would be doing?
It kind of said that SBF put like a secret backdoor so that he was moving funds to Alameda and it was undetected. Like this was something that you put into place potentially. I mean, that's how it read.
Well, that's interesting. So that I can tell you is definitely not true. I don't even know how to code, is the honest, embarrassing answer. I certainly wasn't like building some backdoor in the system. I could barely use the system. That's not true. I knew the system pretty well from a user interface perspective. But I literally never have opened the code base for any of FTX. So I certainly didn't build a backdoor in there, and I don't know exactly what they're referring to. It's like, let me try and give you the nearest neighbor to that. The like thing that is true that like most resembles that statement. Almost boring story, but basically, there was, I don't know if this is what that's referring to, but like I was wrong. I was incorrect on Alameda's balances on FTX by a fairly large number, an embarrassingly large one. And it was because of a like very poorly labeled accounting thing, which was a historical artifact of a time before when like from before FTX had bank accounts. And the result of that was basically there was a time way back yonder when people would wire money to Alameda and then ask to be credited on FTX. That just basically never got screwed up. And that was like a pretty big miss, and meant that Alameda was like substantially more levered than I thought it was. I don't know if that's what that comment's talking about, but that's the best thing the sort of closest thing I can think of for it. It's possible that it went through a number of games of telephone before ending up like that. I don't know.
Then I guess just like the whole FTT thing, just using it as collateral and it being potentially pretty illiquid.
A lot of people use FTT as collateral on FTX. I think it had real value. That being said, there are a few problems. One of which was, again, the position's bigger than I thought it was. That wasn't good. Second of all, was that, and this is fucking embarrassing that I got wrong. Like, given my background, I should not have been the one to get this wrong. I think FTT was basically more legit than most tokens in some ways. Like, I think its value is more economically underpinned than the average, token was. That being said,
why do you feel that way?
Wrong. Because like the buy and burn and shit. Like, it's not just like a token that like does nothing. Like at least it does something, and like there is some like effectively cash flow that goes to it, and like there is a utility for it, and like I don't know, like you can use your judgment on how much you think that's worth.
Yeah.
But like you compare that to like token number 17 on CoinMarketCap. I don't know what token number 17 is, but I suspect it's just a lot less than FTT did. That being said, so I kind of feel like it did have real value. I mean, trade hundreds of millions of dollars a day, had, real market cap. And while it was like, I don't know, Alameda held a lot of it, it didn't hold all of it. Like half of it was just totally free floating. And so like, I don't know, like you could reasonably, quibble over a factor of 2 on its like real liquidity. But not like a factor of like 30 or something. Like, we're talking a matter of like, I don't know, should have been X or like 1.23 times X or something. The bigger problem and the things that I like what actually happened there was not quite that FTX was illiquid. Like, if you look at what happened between, a month ago, FTX's market cap was $8 billion. Today, FTX's market cap is $500 million. What happened between then and now is not that a surprisingly small amount of sales of FTX totally crashed the price. Like, illiquidity wasn't what caused that crash. What caused the crash was something else, which is very embarrassing that I underestimated, which is the massive correlation of things during extreme market moves, especially when they're triggered by fear over the position itself and the massive size that those moves can be. And we've seen that again and again and again in finance, where, long-term capital, similar thing, where you have a bunch of positions which are correlated by virtue of all being held by the same entity. And in this specific scenario where you have a crisis of confidence in that entity combined with a run on the bank and a total lack of liquidity and credit, where the crash can be extremely correlated between all those assets, extremely large and extremely fast.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw. Like, we saw over a 2-day period, FTT lose 90% of its market cap. We saw Solana lose half its market cap. And Solana, that was a real token. And to be clear, I don't think Alameda was selling Solana or FTT during this period. This wasn't the impact of a margin call. This was fear. This was all the reaction to news coming out specifically surrounding FTX and Alameda and their solvency, and combined with the run on the bank on FTX, which basically meant that we saw moves that were 5 times as big as the biggest ever 2-day move for either of those assets in history. Which is on the one hand, you could say, and then on literally the exact same day that they completely collapsed in value, a total run on the bank on FTX where we saw $4 billion per day of customer withdrawals, which is 30 times what we see on a normal day. So on the one hand, you can say, well, that was a 12 sigma event. How could we have predicted it? But that's what everyone always says. And of course, the answer is it wasn't a 12 sigma event because everything's correlated in those events. When you're and their tails are fatter than they appear. And when you the answer for how likely would that be, because that's what it would have taken to create this crisis. If you really wanted to bring down FTX's liquidity, you needed to take 60% out of the market cap of a variety of moderately liquid tokens within a 2-day period and have more than 50% of all assets on FTX attempt to be withdrawn.
Yeah.
That was the triggering condition. And that was so many standard deviations outside of what you would normally expect, except of course, that shit's correlated. And that, specifically when there's a crisis of confidence in the thing itself, you just see you see, once you've got a couple 2 sigma events, everything else follows with high probability. And so it's the stress test scenarios, so to speak, that I was thinking about were not nearly stressful enough. I was thinking about Luna crash type scenarios, which were bad, but weren't this bad because they weren't tuned to specifically the things that would bring down FTX.
Do you feel it was problematic that it was such a large part of the balance sheet?
Yeah. Oh, so first of all, yeah. Well, sorry, or let me take that back. I think it was problematic that it was such a large margin position. If you got a lot of tokens sitting there doing nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're using them as collateral, right, then then you've got to worry about concentration risk on the asset side. And so I think that was problematic. I also think, again, I should have been way more worried about extreme downside cases than I was. But also on top of both of those, I fucked up and was incorrect about the size of the position by a shockingly large number until Sunday night when I recalculated it. Because of this historical accounting quirk, I was off by many billions of dollars on how big this position was.
So FTX International was separate from FTX US, and you had stated that FTX US was solvent. So I was wondering why FTX US had to go to Chapter 11 as well.
Oh, yeah. It's a really good question. Well, you can blame the fucking idiot you're talking to for actually filing this document. I was sort of coerced to doing it, but I should have just said no. I had that right. I probably would have been reported to everyone you could imagine for not doing it, but it would have been worth it because it's the right thing to do to not file. And I would give anything to unfile that right now.
You don't feel that FTX US should have filed for bankruptcy? And well, so if they are completely separate and FTX US was solvent, then would that mean that FTX customers would expect a decent recovery? Just because I feel like all the numbers that have been floating around. Sorry?
FTX or FTX US?
US. Just because the only numbers I've seen floating around, the Financial Times, the recovery looks pretty slim for...
That's very international.
Yeah.
US is 100%.
So then FTX US customers could potentially expect decent recoveries then? After all this?
If the US team hadn't turned off the Amazon account, they could already be withdrawing. You know what the honest answer is? FTX US was so fucking solvent that even after losing $250 million to a hack on the way to bankruptcy, it's still solvent. About $500 million over. Being able to have a future, because that's where I am right now. And you do not want to be in the country with a lot of angry people in it. And you do not want your company to be incorporated in a country with a lot of angry people in it. And so it was, realistically speaking, it's shitty. But the pathway forward for FTX involved Bahamians not being pissed at it.
Because I guess it could have been looked at as insider withdrawal sort of thing.
Oh, it wasn't insider withdrawals. No, this was trying to create a regulatory pathway forward for the exchange.
Just to kind of appease the citizens of the country that you're currently in, basically.
And that the company was about to be assigned a provisional liquidator. And I donated to both parties. I donated about the same amount to both parties this year. That was not generally known because despite Citizens United being literally the highest profile Supreme Court case of the decade and the thing everyone talks about when they talk about campaign finance, for some reason, in practice, no one can possibly fathom the idea that someone in practice actually gave dark. So, I don't know, all my Republican donations were dark. People won't see them. And the reason was not for regulatory reasons. It's because reporters freak the fuck out if you donate to a Republican. They're all super liberal and didn't want to have that fight. So I just made all the Republican ones dark. But I was, second or third biggest Republican donor this year as well. But also it's all for the primaries. They didn't give anything in general elections. They don't give a shit about general elections. It's not what matters. It's the primaries where you have good candidates against bad candidates. The Ukraine one, I wish I could have pulled that off. I wish. I didn't fully understand the goal of it. I was helping Ukraine launder funds for the Democratic Party. I don't know why Ukraine's laundering funds for the Democratic Party. I don't know why they would. I don't know how they would. I don't know which funds they're laundering. I couldn't even tell what direction it was in. But I wish I was part of an international conspiracy that interesting. I don't know exactly who, because they shut off all access to the systems when it's halfway through exploring it. I've narrowed it down to 8 people. I don't know which one it was. But I have a pretty decent sense. I think it is, again, either it was an ex-employee or someone installed malware on an ex-employee's computer. And I don't know for sure which of those it is, and I don't know for sure which one it is, because access is totally shut down right now, because it would be dangerous to allow people to query data. Lawyers chewed me the fuck out for that one. You know, the first thing they said after that was, they said, Sam, you have only one thing to tell you. You have to promise that you never, ever, ever say you fucked up again. I told them to go fuck themselves. I don't think they know what they're talking. I mean, whatever. They know what they're talking about in an extremely narrow domain of litigation. They don't understand the broader context of the world. Like, if you're a complete dick about everything, even if it narrowly avoids making moderately embarrassing statements, it's not helping anything.